now a romance novel, Save the Galaxy, by Ariana Derrante. Chapter 40, Jaster 8. Jaster had been a bit giddy after watching Faye expertly handle the Jedi Council. Master Yoda had been a sad picture with his ears drooping, but the Dooku deserved it for using an ad to try to save an adult who should have been in therapy years ago. He'd also recorded the whole thing since Faye had used the True Mandalorians command center for the call. It would be impolitic to release it to the public, but he was sure Yan would get a kick out of it. Faye had wanted to check on Obi-Wan then, so Jaster accompanied her, taking the opportunity to ask if she had ever met Tade Vizsla. Unfortunately, she had only seen him from afar at a bar on a mission. He wore a cloak over his armor, but she did note that he seemed to have gotten around the Beskar muffling the Force issue by having a boucher with the visor missing, enough that you could see most of his face, which agreed with the statue of him here on Mandalore. The accents on the helmet were blue on black, with the order symbol picked out in white. Jaster wondered if that's where the Vizsla clan's use of blue and black started, then nearly facepalmed as he realized that the clan Vizsla sigil picked out on the crest of their leader's boucher was a corrupted version of the Jedi Order symbol. If only he was on good enough terms with the Vizsla historians who found that in their faces! They arrived at the small courtyard where Jango and Obi-Wan were training to find that they had switched from blaster practice to Beskar practice. Jango had one of the blunted training Beskar and was copying a kata that Obi-Wan was slowly working his way through. Jaster was a bit amused because this was the first time he'd ever seen Jango express an interest in using a Beskar. Jaster always had to use another bird if he wanted to practice against one. As it was, this little demonstration made him itch to grab the Beskar Tonfa he'd had made several years ago. It was a weapon he'd used as a journeyman protector on Concord Dawn, since the lack of edges made it good for defending people without killing your opponent. As Mandalore, it wasn't inconceivable that he'd be facing either a Beskar or a lightsaber in battle. If the Darksaber ever surfaced again, Jaster was guaranteed to have to fight for the right to wield it, so he had two Tonfa made in solid Beskar and practiced with them regularly. If Clan Vizsla still had it, and he suspected they did, considering Deathwatch claimed that Tor Vizsla was Mandalore, they were in for a surprise if the Hutta never faced him in battle. Come to think of it, he should take advantage of Yan and the other Jedi's presence and get some practice against lightsabers. Holdan La was leaning against the support pillar on the edge of the courtyard, watching Janika and his ad. Jaster gave him a nod. He was rather impressed by how La had distinguished himself recently. He was a solid Verde when they were out on missions, usually taking point in scouting, but Jaster had always found him quiet. Now that Verde was calling him something of a Jedi whisperer, what with him scoring both a Jedi adoption and a Jedi in his bed. Case in point, Faye casually went over to La and gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek in greeting. La better sleep with one eye open if he ever went back to staying in their barracks, though Jaster thought with a smirk. The Verde weren't above taking out their petty jealousy through pranks. He had heard through the usual gossip channels that some Verde had gotten Brille Cortel drunk before they snuck in a ship and filled it with a ridiculous number of null G-balls. He imagined he was going to be finding them in odd places on her ship for the next few years. Faye went to join Obi-Wan and Jango, offering to teach them a weaponless kata. Jaster was watching with interest when La wandered over.
Allure. La, quite the ad you've got. Oh no, he's going to cause me so much trouble,
said La fondly. Jaster chuckled. At least La wasn't 100% caught up in the new boar haze, and acknowledged that parenting could be rough some days. Jango had been a total brat for years after Jaster took him in, but Jaster wouldn't have given it up for all the Beskar on Concordia.
Your clan head has refused it, but if you need any help, please ask, he said. I will, Allure. I'm not one of those stubborn Dooku who refuses to ask for help when they need it.
Jaster nodded in acknowledgement. La had contacted him about the situation on Bandamir after all, but he wanted to make the offer explicit. These early cases of adoption and relationships between Mandalorians and Jedi were paving the way for a more integrated future for both their cultures.
Was Yan happy to see his Buad? Yan? Oh, Dooku. To be honest, I'm not sure if either enjoyed their first meeting. They both acted like the conversation was a minefield.
First? What the heck?
Yes, that was my reaction, said La with a nod. Turns out Jin forbid Dooku from interfering with Femore's apprenticeship.
Those mind healers at the temple had better be up to their task of rehabilitating that Jabbar. Otherwise, Jaster honestly had no idea how he was going to stop some of his Verde in the Qui-Gon Jinn hate squad from trying to kill the man if they met him. That they had organized it like an actual squad with ranks and assigned duties was worrying.
But they never even met after Knight Femore graduated.
Jaster was unsure if graduate was the proper term.
Didn't seem to be the case, said Holdan with a shrug. It took Dooku a long moment to even recognize him.
Jaster rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache start building. Jan had some questions to answer, starting with why he hadn't contacted his Buad in the many years since the poor man became a knight. There were only so many things you could blame on Jin.
They didn't seem much friendlier when they left. I showed Femore where to find Erita on my way here.
La looked down at his comm, and Jaster saw that his own was flashing as well. He raised an eyebrow with the news coming from the unofficial Jedi gossip feed. The Jedi were practicing in the main courtyard. In fact, as he looked, some of the other Verde who had been hanging around watching the training headed off, while others looked torn between staying to watch Master Fei and Obika or going to see a whole bunch of Jedi. Jaster sighed. Yeah, better go see what was going on.
You coming, La? The man shook his head. It's almost lunchtime. Obi-Wan needs to eat.
Jaster gave him a slap on the back and understanding before heading out. Their main training courtyard was twice the size of any of the others, with space for blaster and jetpack practice, as well as hand-to-hand and other weapons training. It was the same courtyard his office looked down on, though a glance around showed the contest for Knight Femore's attention had finally ended. Jaster wondered how many credits Erta had made. His Verde were in a crowd around an oval of clear space in the center of the yard. Jaster elbowed one of his Verde to get them to move. They didn't seem to notice it was their Mandalore doing so, but they moved out of the way. Boucher faced forward the entire time. In the clear oval, the Jedi Knights and Jan stood about a meter apart. Jan had on a stylish, tight-fitting orange-brown tunic. Was it Jaster's imagination, or were his trousers also much tighter than normal as well? The four Jedi were all moving synchronically through a complicated lightsaber kata, and at 3 times the speed he'd seen Obi-Wan and Jango several minutes before. The unifying hum of their lightsabers sent a deep thrill through Jaster. Knight Trian, who Jaster really thought he owed a medal to for the way they were joyfully sleeping their way through so many of his Verde, had the Jedi underrobes practically falling off their body. The deep V gaped open, showing toned muscles with every move. Knight Legro was more covered up, as most Mirialanans preferred, but his long black hair was wrapped up in a high tail that almost flew around him as he moved. Knight Zalong wore Jedi tunics without sleeves, showing off some very shapely upper arms, though the shimmer to their skin in the sunlight made Jaster wonder what their species was. As the word spread of the Jedi's practice, Jaster saw more than one Verde skid him a step in the courtyard, turn whichever color was common to blushes for their species, then jump on their mouche to other expression as they joined the crowd. Jaster shook his head. His people were ridiculous. Much as he was enjoying the show, he had to get back to work. He elbowed his way back out of the crowd. Jaster was about halfway to his office when Erita Cruz came hurrying over to him. Mandalore!
What is it?
Femore's disappeared!
What do you mean?
I mean, I gave him the data, then left him talking to some Verde while Crichton grabbed his pack. Crichton was the Verde he suggested, and Jaster approved, to accompany Femore on his mission. Crichton was older than Jaster and widowed, so he wouldn't bother the younger Jedi Knight romantically, and he specialized in undercover security and bodyguarding, a perfect addition to the Knight's mission. When I came back, the Verde were under the impression he'd gone to the Fresher, but I didn't find him there either. He's either run or been kidnapped.
Check the security footage, Jaster ordered. He hoped no one was capable of kidnapping a Jedi right under their noses. Maybe one of the Verde Chris had left him with gotten too fresh and the Knight was hiding?
He eyed the crowd around the Jedi practice, their blue and green blades flashing above the heads of the crowd periodically. Here! Arta thrust her pad under his nose. Femo was at the far end of a corridor along the eastern wall. He checked no one else was in sight before crouching and simply leaping right up over the compound walls. Gongan Force Elsic! And speaking of which, Jaster now realized the purpose of this little lightsaber display. He glared over at Jan, who was tall enough that his head was mostly visible above the crowd. The Jedi purposefully seemed to be avoiding his gaze.
Tell Crichton to get moving after him. Maybe he could catch Femo before he left the planet, but considering this little display had been going on for a half hour or more, Jaster doubted it. In fact, as he watched, the Jedi all came together as one, held their lightsabers in front of their faces, extinguished them, then bowed to their watchers. There were quite a few cheers and banging of fists on nearby armor in appreciation. Zalang was engulfed in a hug by the two Verdes he was in a relationship with, while a bunch more crowded closely around Nitrian. This time, his Verde noticed him when he approached and parted to let their Mandalore through. Master Dooku, would you mind being my partner in a private spar? Jaster hoped he kept the anger out of his tone. His Verde would think they were going somewhere to gawk after the Jedi's display. The tall Jedi nodded and began to follow him. Jaster marched towards his and Jango's private quarters, which had a shielded courtyard they could use to fight. Once there, he grabbed his tonfra from the weapons rack near the door and fit them in a reverse grip around his forearms. Let's go! Jan stood there. I prefer my spars to be less filled with anger. Jaster laughed. And I would prefer to work through my anger in a spar. Jan drew himself up to his full impressive height. I realize you are upset that Knight Femo has disappeared. I take full responsibility for encouraging him in his plan, but I believe he was surprised by how much attention he drew on Mandalore, and he did not wish to be hounded throughout his mission. Well, he sure chose the wrong method for that, said Jaster sardonically. Would you care to elaborate? Jan, half of my people are bounty hunters. Not only do they enjoy a chase, but they're good at what they do. Instead of the one bird I assigned him, he probably has dozens on his tail now. Jan's eyes widened in dismay before he rallied. I'm sure Knight Femo will still manage to evade them. I hope he doesn't, said Jaster flatly. I was sending a Verd with him, so he'd have someone who could protect or call for backup if, say, Death Watch sends an entire squad to kill the author of the book. I don't understand why you Jedi send your people into battle without the backup they need. Knight Femo is capable, and sometimes the Senate leaves no choice. But you don't know, do you? You just Kargan met him for the first time today, so how can you know if he's got the skills to defeat an entire squad of Death Watch and keep a person he's protecting alive? You had at least 20 knights on Gall Drawn, but what if it had only been you? Would you have fared so well? I'm the best duelist in the Order, said Jan, his face made of stone. Jaster gestured at the weapons lockbox up against the wall. Do you want to see how many slug throwers you can block in a duel? For a moment, anger flashed on the man's face. Your point and sarcasm are noted. Jan took a deep breath, probably drawing on the force to calm down. He breathed a few more times before saying, You are angry with me, not Femo. Yes, I am. It never even occurred to me when I sent Femo to you that you hadn't even met him. And that was the heart of the matter. Jan's entire elite was messed up from Yoda to Jin. Jaster was worried and wondered if he could trust his people's reports that other Jedi didn't have these problems. Jan sighed. By all accounts, Femo was on good terms with Qui-Gon after his knighting, so I told myself not to interfere. I was sure he would prefer his master to his grandmaster. There were any number of excuses I could offer for why I didn't contact him after Qui-Gon repudiated him, but meeting him today showed me I was wrong to let those excuses keep me from getting to know my Grand Padawan. Jaster felt his anger cool a little. At least the man knew he'd made a mistake. Jan seemed to have sensed it. Now, if you promise not to shoot me, we can spar. Jaster settled into the private comm at the desk in his quarters rather than his office. This comm call was for him, not the Mandalore. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me, Madame New. I've enjoyed our correspondence so far. The stern-looking woman smiled at him.
call me Jocasta, Mandalore.
Then I'm Jaster.
He gave her his best smile. Jaster, then. Let's see what puzzle pieces on Tare Vizsla we can fill in. What followed was a delightful 2 hours of discussion trying to put together disparate sources and divine rumor from facts. For example, Jocasta had filled in lots of details on Tara Vizsla's early life in the temple. They knew who his master was, and even had a tale of one of his missions as a Jedi Knight from a holocron of one of his contemporaries. They had an apocryphal story on how he had found the crystal for the dark saber, which both of them reluctantly decided was too far-fetched to be taken seriously. That the spirits of Mandalore had gifted him the crystal during his Vergoten would be quite hard, considering there was no Kyber on the entire planet. Jaster knew that Tade had had Ade, but none of the records could agree on how many. Clan Vizsla might possibly have better info, but nobody in their clan was close enough for Jaster to share it.
I should let you go, Jocasta. It's even later for you than for me here,
said Jaster reluctantly when they had passed the 2-hour mark.
Jocasta looked tired. He was pretty sure they could talk all night, but he'd ate himself in the morning. He yawned at the very thought.
Jocasta seemed dismayed. This is so much more enjoyable than my other research project at the moment, she admitted.
The no attachment research.
She nodded. That report is mostly finished, but it has opened up another line of research which is disturbing. I'm bringing it before the council tomorrow, and I doubt they will thank me.
Do you want to discuss it?
He asked. Not until after I inform the council, she said with a grimace, then changed the subject. How has Jan been?
I'm a bit angry with him right now, admitted Jaster.
Oh? About what?
He hadn't even met his grandpadawan. I know some of that is to blame on Jem, but I hope this isn't normal for Jedi elite.
Their discussion in Spa this afternoon, and watching the takedown of Yonamathe earlier,
had taken away much of his anger, but it still worried him.
I have had 4 official Padawans, and taken several others under my wing in my time. I keep up with all the research, and check in on them and my grandpadawans regularly, said Jocasta. Most Jedi lineages are quite close with regular meals and keeping in touch. I'm not sure what is wrong with Yoda's current lineage, but they are not representative of the Order as a whole, I assure you.
I'm relieved to hear it.
And if you're still angry with him, you can try sleeping with him. We ended many an argument that way when we were younger.
Jaster was glad he wasn't drinking, so he didn't choke on anything other than air. We're not... He trailed off, unsure if she knew about his and Jan's deception.
Not actually in a relationship, I know. She looked amused. But sex is a healthy way to work out frustrations, and Jan is easy. Just ask him if he wants to have sex as friends, and if he says yes, you're good to go.
Jaster couldn't help himself. She was so competent and intelligent. And are you similarly easy to get in bed?
He asked in a low voice. She smirked at him. Oh, I'm much more complicated and demanding, but you've made a good start. Take care, Jaster.
You too, Jocasta.
Jaster just sat there for a moment, then took his half-aroused body to the pressure for a late-night shower, thoughts of Bob Jedi crowding his mind in the process.